Academy students, welcome to Hunger Games history. Today, we will enter a new era, the so-called New Age, starting with, of course, the iconic 11th annual Hunger Games. Despite the low ratings, President Ravenstill had agreed to one more year of the games. Due to the generous donations of names such as Strabo Plinth and the minds of bright students such as Coriolanus Snow, the Department of War was finally able to start turning the fate of the games around in this 11th edition, with a series of changes and updates in the model that would mark the history of the event. The first significant change was the announcement of a monetary prize for the victor, along with the promise of building a victor's village in every district, a luxurious residential area in which their victors could live in. This was announced in advance in all districts, hoping to drive some of the citizens to volunteer. While no one stepped up at this year's reaping, despite the incentives, the roster of drafted tributes seemed promising, being one of the factors catching the attention of returning viewers. As a measure to better improve the chances of all tributes making it to the arena alive, and also to prevent communication between districts until arrival, some of the donated money was invested in upgrading the train wagons, reserving one wagon per district. Once at the capital station, there was already a small crowd awaiting the tributes. As it was previously advertised, the possibility of being one of the first seeing the tributes live. The name of each tribute was called, one by one, as the wagons opened to allow the tributes to walk down and across the station, the eyes of some of the capital elite looking down on them as they passed through. Now that capital citizens had the opportunity to both sponsor tributes and place bets on them, those the most into the games took the chance to get an earlier look of the tributes to be able to place the earliest and cheapest bets, frivolously scanning the roster for those who appeared the strongest. One of the tributes who caught the most attention of the public right away was Proton from District 5, a boy with large shoulders and a rather healthy appearance. He kept his expression shut as he walked through the platform, refusing to look the audience in the eye. However, not only in brute strength were the citizens interested in. Mags Flanagan, the girl from District 4, had caught the attention of most as soon as she came out of the wagon in a beautiful dress, decorated with elements reminiscent of her district. Fishing lines sewed the details together, such as hook pendants and pieces of fishnets reused as laces. She offered a shy smile to the audience, who were enchanted by her friendliness and etiquette, unusual coming from those of the district. Behind her, a young and meek-looking boy followed Mags like a shadow, Mako, her district partner. In order to popularize and motivate bettors even further, tributes were then taken to the Peacekeeper headquarters, where their physical and psychological evaluation was assessed. As the capital was, for the first time ever, interested in getting to know all tributes and their names, individual interviews soon followed, with Lucky Flickerman as their host. The interviews were mandatory for all tributes to participate. They started with the District 1 tributes, who mentioned how the announcement of a monetary prize from winning the games had sparked some interest back at home. Lazarus and Victoria, from 2, commented on how happy their district was, having received 2 victors so far, and how they knew they could do well if they were to follow Aaron's and Vivia's footsteps. Mags, from District 4, captivated the audience with her charm, as Lucky Flickerman prompted her to talk about her dress. She explained how she had the habit of bringing something comforting with her to the reaping for good luck, and how every embroidered detail on her dress had a connection to her home or to a family member. Proton, from District 5, claimed to the audience how great of a fighter he was, as he never lost a fight at his school. Caius, from 7, let the audience know about his chances to win, because he had joined forces with the right tributes in order to do so. However, his voice was trembling and lacking confidence. As part of their internship, select university students were offered the chance to escort the tribute during their brief time at the capital, being given the responsibility of educating them and better preparing them to act civilized in front of the cameras. Interactions between student and tribute were unprotected contact only and always monitored, ensuring the safety of those involved. Students responsible for the District 1 and 2 tributes came from wealthy and knowledgeable families, having had access to rumors about the mysterious arena of the 11th Hunger Games, which had promised to change everything they knew about the event. Bigger and more dangerous, the rumors claimed. In response to this, and to better prepare their tributes, the students advised the two districts to stick together. Noticing these tributes grouping up, others did not lose time in recruiting people in response. Proton, the boy from District 5, and the biggest tribute by far, had recruited the boys from Districts 3, 5, 7 and 10, threatening them to follow his orders, or he would be the one ending them with his own hands. However, some boys he attempted to recruit were firm in their negative response, like Mako. Instead, the boy decided to stick with his district partner Mags, along with Remora from District 10, a girl who claimed that she and her family were originally from District 4, but got stuck in 10 during the war. The tribute spent a couple of days lodged at the Peacekeepers' headquarters, anticipating their send-off to the arena. Bored out of their minds, the guards would tease the tributes here and there, spreading misinformation about the arena that awaited them in exchange for laughs. One evening, one of the Peacekeepers had an idea to pass the time. He grabbed some of their squad's own training equipment and protection and provided it to the tributes, asking them to show off their skills in hand-to-hand combat, and claiming that they could give them tips on how to improve in time for the games. Proton, from District 5, did not waste time getting in the ring. When no other tribute followed, the Peacekeeper goaded them, explaining how they should be grateful for any training opportunities they could get. When Proton pointed directly at Mako, the Peacekeepers followed by pointing their rifles at him and instructing the District 4 tribute to get in the ring. Mako looked back at Mags, whose features were filled with worry. She watched as the two other guards kept their rifles aimed at the ring, instructing the tributes to not try anything stupid, while a third one pointed the rifle at them. She was aware that there was a rule to not hurt each other before the game starts, but could that really be enforced if the fighting was being incentivized by Peacekeepers in the first place? The guards laughed as they watched Mako run laps around the ring as an attempt to escape from Proton. He was definitely more agile, but what he had in speed, he lacked in strength. Not bearing to watch it any longer, Mags got up and rushed to join him at the ring to get between Mako and Proton, but was stopped by one of the Peacekeepers. The distraction allowed Proton to finally close the distance with Mako, and all it took was one punch to knock the boy down. Gasps were heard, but Proton wasn't done yet. Towering over Mako, he pinned the boy to the floor and twisted his right arm, hard enough to make the boy cry out loud. Deciding against shooting to not call any more attention to them, Peacekeepers jumped into the ring to break the two apart. They pulled Proton away as he shouted something about District 4 not being able to use their precious tridents no more, and cuffed them to the walls. The remaining tributes were instructed to go back to the piles of hay in the stables that served as their beds. Mako was left with no medical assistance, as that would have reported the Peacekeepers' illicit behavior. Mags did the best with what they had to bring him some comfort and alleviate the pain, but all they succeeded in doing was confirming exactly what Proton intended. In that state, Mako would not be able to use any kind of weapon to defend himself from what was coming. The next day, the tributes were finally sent to the arena, still in the same clothes as the day they arrived. The capital citizens were on the edge of their seats as they awaited for the big reveal, the much anticipated new location for the games, with the arena being different for the first time ever. Tributes were transported in Peacekeeper trucks and escorted by soldiers across a large electric fence, a gun pointed to each of their backs. They now wore a skin-tight bracelet that monitored their pulse, sending the data directly to the game makers. Once the tributes were in position, the Peacekeepers retreated back to outside of the fence, from where they positioned themselves in towers with a view over the arena, ready to act in case of an attempted escape. The tributes found themselves in an abandoned hydroelectric power plant, out of service ever since the dark days. The place had been repurposed to hold the 11th annual Hunger Games, allowing for a change of scenery and new challenges, carefully orchestrated by Dr. Gall. They stood right in the middle of a concave corridor surrounding the weapon pile. The river had dried by the time of the games, but had the power plant been working, water would be flowing right where the tributes were standing. The floodgates, turbines, and the ruins of what is left of the power station were north of the tributes. Everything left, just as it was after the bombing. Very few details were changed or added to accommodate for the games. Those included the cameras spread around to monitor the tributes, the electric fence to delimit the arena, and propellers installed on each side of the corridor to control the potential water flow. From each side of the riverbanks, vegetation extended for miles. Despite citizens expecting a rivalry between the two main tribute groups, the one led by Proton and another consisting of the District 1 and 2 tributes, they mostly ignored each other once the bell rang, signaling the start of the games. The corridor's slope caused some trouble to those who wished to escape the carnage, though the vegetation that had overgrown and taken over parts of the power plant provided some support to help the tributes climb out. Too hesitant to enter a fight with their opposing group, the dominant tributes instead targeted the weakest ones, finishing off those who struggled to climb up the slope. The first to fall was Glenn, from 8, killed by Grant from District 1, who had picked up a sword from the weapon pile. The District 11 pair soon followed, as the two young tributes had hesitated too long to start moving, with Lazarus, from District 2, finishing them both in a blink of an eye. Having been greeted with an arena completely different from what any district citizen had witnessed before, many tributes were caught off guard, were led to their demise. Mags, Mako and Remora, who were all decent climbers, decided not to risk it at the weapon pile and instead fled, especially with Mako's current condition. Remora took the lead, with Mags instructing Mako to go after. Noticing his attempted escape, Proton ran straight after the boy, knowing that he would struggle to climb with his hurt arm. Mags, who had stayed behind to ensure that Mako would escape safely, started climbing quickly upon seeing Proton approach. The District 5 tribute followed, but with her leg, Mags managed to kick him down and buy them some time to get up the slope. Proton shouted something inaudible to the trio from the bottom of the slope, picking his sword back up before turning his attention to a nearby tribute who struggled to climb out. With no hesitation, Proton struck his weapon into Camber's back, the young boy from District 6. Closer to the weapon pile, Victoria, from 2, was able to eliminate District 8's Melissa, while the other group took care of Connor, from 12, who had been brave enough to try and take a weapon. Connor had come face to face with Caius, from 7, who struck him in the leg with his axe, making the boy fall as he screamed in pain. Proton, now back at the scene, then used his sword for the final blow. The District 9 couple, Sorge and Rice, were one of the few outside the two main groups who were able to grab a weapon, a machete and a pitchfork, respectively. However, both were instantly cornered by the District 1 and 2 group, who had no intentions of letting them escape with the weapons. Acting quickly, Sorge struck his machete into Lapis Lazuli, the girl from District 1, and ran away right through where she fell, being followed by Rice. Now outnumbered, the District 1 and 2 tributes retreated from the area, leaving the weapon pile to Proton and his group. Once the action died down, game makers confirmed the vitals of the fallen tributes and ordered the head peacekeeper to shoot 7 times into the air, signaling the deaths of 7 tributes. The shots were loud enough for everyone in the arena to hear. By using this system, they aimed to avoid any situation reminiscent of the 7th annual Hunger Games, letting the other contestants know exactly how many were still in the game. For the remainder of the day, nothing more happened. Proton and his group sat around the weapon pile, as the boy proclaimed to the other tributes how he'd seen the strategy being effective in the past, and how they should follow it. Those who had escaped initially all ventured deep into the vegetation, aiming to be as far away from the other tributes as possible. Vera, from 12, and Rim, from 6, spent the entirety of the first day walking non-stop, with Vera believing she would be able to find a way out of the arena eventually. Mags, Mako and Remora found an area where vegetation was more dense, deciding to take a break from the hike. To ease the mood, the three told stories to each other about their life in the districts, with Remora reminiscing about her time in District 4, from which she remembered very little. Mags and Mako told her about how different the district became ever since the war, while Remora talked about all the different customs and environment of District 10. She explained how her family was not the only one from 4 being trapped in 10 after the war, and that she lived in a small community with others in the same situation. The group composed of District 1 and 2 tributes was determined to find Sorge and Rice, both to avenge Grant's district partner and to take care of the few tributes they saw being able to claim a weapon from the pile. Having roamed around the arena for a good part of the first day, by day 2, Sorge and Rice had taken shelter not too far from their initial position, inside the ruins of the power plant itself, from where they could keep a closer eye on the corridor, hoping that water would eventually flow. The tributes still didn't have proper access to water during their stay at the capital, and after the initial fighting and running of the day before, they became severely dehydrated. It was in the early evening that Grant and the District 2 tributes finally found their targets, who, after being suddenly cornered inside the ruins, were eliminated rather easily. The group then grabbed their weapons to carry with them. That was, however, all of the action that capital citizens received on day 2. The District 1 and 2 tributes had no intention to fight Proton's group just yet, and neither did Proton want to leave the weapon pile. Despite coming from their districts in better condition, they too had started to feel the toll of hunger and thirst. Those who were in even worse condition, like Rim from 6 and Vera from 12, kept looking for a source of water or a way to escape, realizing by day 3 that it was hopeless. Vera fell on that morning of day 3, completely exhausted and dehydrated. District 1 and 2 tributes had received some food and water from sponsors in the morning, after having provided the only action of the day before. It was clear for all, by then, that the arena did not offer any means of sustenance, leaving the remaining tributes desperate, as the games were dragging for longer than expected. Mags thought of an idea, showing Mako and Remora which types of leaves and twigs to collect. Once the trio was able to gather enough materials, the District 4 girls spent the rest of the day weaving baskets out of them, calmly explaining to Remora how to do the same, while Mako rested to recover from his broken arm, which by now was very swollen and bruised. The audience was puzzled by Mag's behavior, some joking that even the tributes had gotten bored. For most of the third day, they were entertained by this peculiar behavior, until that too got old. It was on day 4 that rain fell in the arena, prompting Mags to instruct Mako and Remora to pick up the baskets and place them in position. Through this method, they were able to collect enough rainwater to satisfy their thirst, surprising the capital citizens watching. For the first time, the arena's environment allowed for tributes to show off a different set of skills, which piqued the audience's curiosity. When the group reunited, Mags surprised Mako with something she had been working on all night. With the leftover materials they had collected for the baskets, she crafted a handmade cast that held Mako's arm in place, allowing the boy to keep it as still as possible to minimize the pain. With teary eyes, the boy thanked her with a one-arm hug. The novelty of Mags's abilities did not last for long, though. After a full day without a single death, not only the citizens began to lose interest, the game makers were furious about some of the tributes just sitting around doing nothing. That evening, when Mags, Mako and Remora approached the water corridor from above to see if it would be safe to grab a weapon for themselves, they found out that Proton was still there, sitting around the weapon pile with the rest of his pack. While Mags hoped to get something she could defend herself and the others with, they were out of luck. At least while Proton was too busy doing nothing, the group would be relatively safe, Mags thought. Her priority now would be to get as much distance from him as possible before Proton decides to start moving, and in the meanwhile, to find an alternative means of defense. During the hottest hour of Day 5, Grim, from District 6, finally succumbed, too weak and dehydrated to continue, a death that was deemed boring by those watching. Given that 13 tributes were still alive, it was clear that these games would become the longest so far, while not being entertaining enough to keep the audience's retention. This year turning into a fiasco after all that happened the years before was simply not an option. Not after all the promises that had been made about revamping the games and turning them into a proper spectacle, alongside the big investment that was to build the Victor's Village and advertise the games. Aiming to get Proton's alliance up and moving, the game makers decided at this moment to power up the turbines and open the floodgates. Their plan was to gradually fill up the corridor with water to get them to leave, but instead, the water came through with a strong, unintended pressure. The game makers attempted to counter the pressure by switching the direction of the current. Caught off guard, both Proton's group and all the weapons from the pile were dragged by the water into the turbines, giving the tributes a gruesome but quick death. Proton, from 5, was the only one to survive. Having worked in the dam of his district, the boy knew how to swim and was able to get to the riverbank in time to save himself. However, all he had now was a small knife he kept in his pocket, as his main weapon was carried away by the current. By evening, the propellers were shut off and the floodgates were closed, leaving a good amount of water in the corridor for tributes to drink. Despite not being their initial plan, the game makers figured that the 4 shots back-to-back signaling the death of most of Proton's pack would drive some tributes to come out of hiding and attempt their luck at the now unguarded weapon pile. Even with no weapons left, the sight of water would hopefully prompt them to come closer. Wanting to get rid of the weakest tributes, who would likely be very thirsty, and at the same time show off her newest creation, Dr. Gall had big plans for the next day. At dawn, while most were sleeping, a group of bolt snappers, an electric eel with piranha teeth, was released into the water corridor. Engineered to detect movement or a foreign smell in the water, bolt snappers attack in packs, unlock their jaws into intruding people or objects, moment at which they discharge electricity if their prey is alive. The electricity current is constant until both the intruder and the mutt fall dead. Heidi, the girl from 5, was the first one falling victim to the mutts after arriving at the corridor in the morning of the 6th day. She slowly crouched down while holding onto the vines, careful not to slip, but once her hand touched the water, the bolt snappers were immediately alerted. Feeling the bite of one of the mutts, Heidi let go of the vine in surprise, falling into the water as the eels finished the job. In the middle of the day, the boy from District 1 and the couple from District 2 finally made it back to the water corridor to carefully check on the status of Proton's group, just as the game makers had predicted. The trio had been walking for hours, and after days without receiving any sponsor gifts, they were quite desperate for some water. Grant, from 1, was the first running towards the corridor and crouching to drink. Bolt snappers swam towards him just as quickly, leaving Victoria and Lazarus in shock as they witnessed the fate of the boy. The two fled back to deep vegetation, wanting as much distance from the mutts as possible. Mags, Mako and Remora had also come back to the corridor's area after hearing the shots the previous day, having hoped that it meant Proton's group had started moving and that they could finally grab a weapon for themselves. They set up camp above the ruins of the power plant, having a clear view over the water corridor, just in time to observe what had happened to Grant. The trio was curious about the creatures in the water, but Mags suggested waiting until nightfall to come closer, as it was likely that more tributes would come out during the day in search of water. and she didn't want to put the group in a dangerous situation, especially when she still had no means of defending them. It was in the late evening that Fiburn, the girl from 3, sheared in relief upon the sight of the river now being filled up, surprisingly lasting this long without water, as the girl knew a few tricks to retain her body's level of hydration as much as possible. She crouched down and almost dipped her whole face in the water, drinking it uncontrollably. Her sudden and abrupt movement alerted some of the bolt snappers that had been released in the water, causing Fiburn to let out a loud shriek before meeting her demise. Her terrified scream echoed through the arena, followed by a gunshot announcing her fall. The remaining tributes were startled, wondering what had just happened that caused so many deaths in the same 2 days, and what could have made the tribute scream like that. Most of them stayed put in their shelters, not daring to explore and risk their lives even further, while Mags and her group carefully descended towards the corridor's edge in order to investigate. The bodies of the 3 fallen tributes floated in the water, along with some of the bolt snappers that had died in their own attacks. Too dark to see anything properly, Mako grabbed a long branch and used it to bring one of the eel's bodies to shore and closer to him. But as soon as the stick hit the water, those still alive reacted to it in an instant. The boy almost lost his balance, had it not been for Mags grabbing him by the waist, who was keeping a close eye on him. Blaming herself for having put her district partner in danger, Mags suggested they should leave for now. In the morning of the 7th day, Mags and her group woke up early, hoping to lower the chances of another tribute seeing them by the riverbed when trying to approach the water once more. The District 4 girl intended to use her woven baskets to collect water from the corridor more safely, thinking of ways to avoid putting her hands directly in the water. Like a eureka moment, Mako excitedly suggested that she could untie one of the fishing lines that adorned her dress, using it as a string to lower and raise the basket safely. Having had her attention drawn towards her dress and the materials that composed it, Mags suddenly thought of something too. She suggested attempting to catch the mats and use them as weapons against other tributes, as the group had been roaming around the arena completely defenseless. With the others agreeing with the plan, Mags turned some of the accessories in her clothes into fishing hooks and tied them to a line. Remora was responsible for catching the animals, while Mags crafted a big enough basket to fit the eel and water inside. As the muds tended to bite anything that entered the water, a fishing hook on its own did the trick for catching them. The night had fallen, and no gunshots had been heard the entire day. It was now clear that the tributes had no interest in exploring the arena further, after having their worries increased due to all the deaths the days before. Likewise, for the entirety of the 8th day, everyone stayed in their own corners. No one was brave enough to even come near the water corridor. Now, for a good part of day 9, spectators and game makers had to go through the same as the day before, with little to no action, as each terrified tribute curled up in their shelters made out of leaves and twigs, until a gunshot caught everyone off guard. Proton, from District 5, had found Nutmeg, the girl from 7, who had climbed up one of the thinner trees. Afraid that the propellers could be turned on again at any moment, Proton knew not to risk going near the water, but he too was starting to suffer from thirst. Now he knew that doing something could earn him sponsors, and as such, he attempted every trick in the book to get Nutmeg to come down. He lied to her, claiming that her district partner Caius was still around and had been worried about her. But Nutmeg retaliated, saying that if that was the case, he could come get her instead. Frustrated, Proton started kicking the flimsy tree trunk, making it swing the more he stomped. "You're insane!" the girl shouted as she got up to jump to the closest tree to get away. But as the tree swayed due to Proton's kicks, Nutmeg lost balance, causing her to fall. He then finished her off, using the knife he kept in his pocket. As he predicted, a drone soon entered the forest's canopy, carrying a water bottle for Proton. Despite almost hitting some of the trees, it was successful in delivering the sponsor gift to the boy, who decided to spend the remainder of the evening resting. In the meantime, Mags, Mako and Remora brainstormed ways to better use the bolt snappers to their advantage. Reusing their fishing lines, Mags set up a tripwire, attaching it to one of the fish baskets Remora had placed high up in a tree. Their idea was that the trap would break open and release the eel if anyone were to trigger it. As for Victoria and Lazarus, the two had moved to one of the furthest points of the arena, on the eastern riverbank. Still quite in shock from Grant's death, they wanted as much distance from the water corridor as possible. It was now the 10th day, way past the longest duration of the games thus far. Other than a spike in viewership here and there, the number of people watching was below the expected, and the amount of money received through bets, donors and sponsors had been decreasing since the first couple of days. As a first attempt to get the tributes to move, Dr. Gall used the speakers inside the arena to make an announcement, stating that the water in the corridor was no longer dangerous, and that the level was lowered to allow them to easily cross from one side of the arena to the other. Knowing how thirsty the tributes were at that point, she expected the announcement to drive them together. Mags's worries grew day by day. While she was grateful that their whole group was still alive, the longer the games took, the more severe the situation for Mako was becoming, left with his arm untreated. While the swelling reduced, his skin in the affected area was now discolored, and the boy had developed a fever. Mags insisted that they would stay in the ruins instead of actively moving, in order to let him rest as much as possible, but Dr. Gall's announcement had made her nervous, as they were quite close to the water corridor. The trio came out of hiding to keep an eye on the water and see if anyone would dare to make the crossing, but for their luck, it seemed that the tributes were quite distrusting of the game makers. Not a single soul believed the words about the water being safe, still refusing to move. That included the District 2 pair, Lazarus and Victoria, the only armed tributes besides Proton, and who Dr. Gall was banking on giving a little boost to get into action. Despite this, Mags spent the entire day monitoring the corridor, just in case, allowing Mako and Remora to rest in the meantime. Coriolanus Snow, an intern at the Department of War, suggested then to Dr. Gall to run the tributes together in a different way. Having learned previously about the genetically modified rabbit that the head game maker kept as a pet, Snow made the suggestion of unleashing them near the tribute hiding spots. Smiling at the thought, Dr. Gall ordered one of the biologists to prepare the mutts for release. Pit bunnies, an apparently normal-looking rabbit with the bite force of a pit bull, were dropped from just above, where Lazarus and Victoria were hiding. Victoria at first was puzzled by how cute the animal looked, if it wasn't for Lazarus firmly reminding her that the creatures were dropped there for a reason, and that they should probably do something about them. But when Victoria tried to shoo them away with her spear, one of the bunnies lunged at the shaft and broke it in half, like it was nothing. The girl immediately took a step back and started running, with Lazarus and the pit bunnies following right after. The two ran for a while, until they were forced to stop, as they had just reached the water corridor. Not being too ahead of the mutts, the pair had to make a decision fast. The game maker's words were true, after all. The water levels were indeed lower, but not knowing how to swim at all, Lazarus still hesitated. The rabbits got to him first, prompting Victoria to jump into the water and avoid the same fate. Mags, who was still keeping watch, alerted Mako and Remora the moment she noticed movement in the vegetation, signaling for the girl to bring one of the bolt snappers over. As soon as they saw Victoria stepping into the water, Remora released one of the bolt snappers they captured back into the corridor. The mutt woke from its slumber as it felt the movement in the water, quickly swimming towards Victoria and eliminating her. It was at that point that only Mags's group and Proton remained. Remora brought up whether they should go separate ways now, but the District 4 girl immediately contested. She stressed that she intended to stay with Mako until the end, and that she was welcome to stay as well. Considering their low defenses, Remora agreed, finding strength in numbers. Mags did not know for sure who their last opponent was, but any care was too little, Someone armed could make easy work of the tree if they were caught off guard. Not wanting to waste any more time, she asked for Remora's help in collecting stones and branches they could stick to the ground to set up obstacles in the area, with the goal of slowing their opponent down if they were to be chased. Proton, also calculating that only a few could still be left, continued roaming around the western riverbank looking for those hiding. He arrived at the scene just as the trio were collecting branches and other materials by the river. A smile formed on his face as he spotted Mako, who he hadn't finished business with, and Mags, who had dared to get in his way on the first day. She would be his first target, so that then he could move on to Mako without her interference. And so, the District 5 tribute ran straight towards Mags. The girl was crouching, distracted with something on the ground, not expecting that their last opponent would have been so close. Mako, unable to help with the material collection, was standing guard, and spotted Proton first. Seeing the boy unarmed, Mako ran and got in between Proton and Mags, calling out for her to get up and run. The boy was caught by surprise the moment Proton took out his knife from a hidden pocket and revealed the blade to Mako. He was about to shout to warn Mags and Remora about the knife, but Proton did not hesitate in jumping him, carving the knife deep into his abdomen. Mags let out a shriek and ran towards Mako, attempting to catch his body as he fell on the ground. It was Remora who had to grab Mags by her shoulder, pulling her up to start running against her will. She knew there was nothing they could do about Mako, nothing but avoiding dying the same death. Mags's tears blurred her vision as she ran from Proton, her stomach turning once the shot announcing Mako's death was heard. She forced herself to clean her eyes so she could see properly where she was going, remembering the traps they set up the other day. The two continued running, leading Proton to the vegetation near the ruins. While Mags was a faster runner, she attempted to match Remora's pace so that they'd stick together, until the District 10 girl suddenly tripped and fell behind. Mags stopped running the same second to go help her, but with how close Proton was to the girl, Remora herself closed her eyes and nodded for Mags to go on, knowing it was hopeless. She did her best to kick Proton away and buy Mags a few seconds, though it barely slowed the boy down. Now, all of Mags's hopes had to be put on the traps working, or her friend's deaths would have been for nothing. Sneakily avoiding the tripwire, the girl pretended to catch her breath right after passing its location, giving Proton a false sense of victory. The moment he took a step forward to get to the girl, the fishing line snapped, the basket tipped over, and the bolt snapper fell on him. Mags had to turn her face away, not wanting to see the scene unroll, as her last opponent fell victim to the mutt's fatal electric shock. Once the shot signaling Proton's death was fired, the girl fell to her knees, her tears storming back as the relief of being the last one standing was completely overshadowed by the guilt of failing to protect her friends. Mags Flanagan, from District 4, was then announced victor of the 11th Annual Hunger Games. Despite the dwindling viewership during the slower moments of the games, this exciting finale brought many citizens back, as they wondered whether or not Proton would be able to take down 3 tributes on his own, or if another of their favorites, Mags, would be able to turn the tide around. Her victory was celebrated due to her wit and grace, becoming the first victor catching the capital's interest past the games, and taking part in a victory tour, where she would be required to visit and make a speech in each of the 12 districts. Academy students, do you believe that experimenting with a large outdoor arena so soon was a good idea by the game makers? What new benefits and problems could an outdoor arena bring to the Hunger Games that would not normally happen in the standard capital arena? Let us know in the comments.